In the misty village of Wickford, a master candlemaker is found dead in his locked workshop, a single doused candle by his side, a chilling clue to a sinister murder. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of envy, obsession, and betrayal, a rival's bitterness, a collector's mania, and an apprentice's fear of losing everything. Each hides a secret, but only one holds the key to the killer's identity. As the silent flame whispers its truth, Poirot reveals a poison-laced plot in a locked room where trust burned out. Will you follow the clues before the light fades? Chapter 1. The Locked Workshop. The mist hung low over the village of Wickford, curling like a living thing around the crooked chimneys and narrow lanes. It was the sort of autumn morning where the air bit at one's fingertips, and the world seemed hushed, as if holding its breath. In the dining room of the gilded Wick Inn, Hercule Poirot sat at a small table, his breakfast untouched save for a delicate cup of tisane, which he sipped with measured precision. His impeccable mustache, waxed to twin points, quivered slightly as he surveyed the room, noting the rustle of newspapers and the clink of cutlery among the handful of early risers. Captain Hastings, ever the eager companion, burst into the room with the air of a man who had stumbled upon a secret too large to contain. His cheeks were flushed from the chill outside, and his eyes sparkled with the thrill of gossip. "Poirot, old chap," he said, sliding into the chair opposite. "You won't believe what's happened. Elias Thorne, the candlemaker, found dead this morning in his workshop. The place was locked tight, door bolted, windows barred. And here's the queer bit, a single candle beside him, doused, not burned out." Poirot set down his cup, his green eyes narrowing. "Doused, you say, mon ami? The wick was wet?" "Exactly," Hastings replied, leaning forward. "As if someone had poured water over it. The local constable's calling it a heart attack, but it's dashed odd, don't you think?" Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the tablecloth. "A heart attack in a locked room with a candle extinguished by water. Non, Hastings, this is not the work of nature. A man does not douse his candle in his final moments unless he has reason, or someone else has reason for him. Tell me, where is this workshop?" Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's sudden shifts from repose to action, grinned. "Just down the lane, near the church. Shall we?" The village of Wickford seemed to shrink under Poirot's scrutiny as they walked, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones. The workshop of Elias Thorne stood apart from the cluster of thatched cottages, its stone walls weathered but sturdy, its single door reinforced with iron. A small crowd had gathered, villagers whispering behind gloved hands, their breaths fogging in the cold. Inspector Graves, a broad-shouldered man with a mustache that lacked Poirot's elegance, stood guard, his face set in a scowl. "Monsieur Poirot," Graves said, his tone grudging. "Heard of you, of course, but this is a simple matter. Old Thorne had a weak heart, keeled over at his work. No need for your methods." Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. "And yet, Inspector, a locked room and a doused candle suggest otherwise. May I see the body?" Graves hesitated, then stepped aside. The workshop was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a single lantern held by a constable. Shelves lined the walls, laden with candles of every size, tapers, pillars, votives, some half-molded, others gleaming with fresh polish. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax, tinged with something sharper, almost medicinal. At the center, slumped over a scarred workbench, lay Elias Thorne, His gray hair was disheveled, his hands, calloused from years of crafting, clutched a partially carved taper. Beside him stood a single candle, its wick blackened and sodden, a faint puddle of water beneath it. Poirot knelt, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. "No burns on the hands," he murmured. "No wax spilled." The candle was not knocked over, yet water was applied. Curious. He leaned closer, sniffing the air. "This smell, Hastings. It is not only wax. There is something else. Lavender, perhaps, but with an edge." Hastings frowned. "Lavender? From the candle, surely." "Non," Poirot said, rising. "The candle is unscented. The lavender comes from elsewhere." He turned to Graves. "The door. It was bolted from within, you say?" "Bolted tight," Graves confirmed. "Had to break it down. Windows are barred. No sign of tampering." Poirot paced the small space, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. He paused at a workbench corner, where a small vial of oil glistened faintly in the lantern light. He lifted it, uncapping it to inhale. "Lavender oil," he said softly. "Yet the cap is loose, as if recently opened, and this—" He tilted the vial, noting a faint crystalline residue on the rim. "Not oil, but something else." Graves scoffed. "You're seeing mysteries where there are none, Poirot. The man spilled water in his final moments, that's all." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Spilled water, Inspector? Yet the floor is dry, the workbench unmarred. No, this was no accident. Elias Thorne was murdered, and the doused candle is a clue to the killer's method." Hastings shivered, though not from the cold. "Murder? In a locked room? But how, Poirot?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, mon ami, is what the little gray cells shall uncover. Come, we must meet those who knew Monsieur Thorne. The truth, it hides in their words, and their silences." Chapter 2. The Suspects. The parlor of Elias Thorne's modest home was a study in contrasts, a room of homely warmth, with its crackling hearth and worn armchairs, now chilled by the shadow of death. The late afternoon light filtered through heavy curtains, casting long, wavering shadows across the oak floorboards. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space as if it were a stage. His polished shoes gleamed, and his mustache, meticulously groomed, seemed to bristle with anticipation. Captain Hastings, seated near the fire, fidgeted with his pipe, his eyes darting between the three figures summoned to face Poirot's scrutiny. Inspector Graves, standing by the door with arms crossed, wore the expression of a man who preferred facts to theatrics. "I've rounded them up, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "But I'll wager this is a waste of time." Thorne's heart gave out, plain and simple. Poirot's green eyes flickered with polite disdain. "Plain, Inspector? Nothing in a locked room with a doused candle is plain. The little gray cells, they do not rest on assumptions." He turned to the trio seated before him, each a portrait of unease. "Let us begin, mes amis. A man is dead, and one of you, or perhaps all, knows more than you have said." Margaret Vane sat ramrod straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was a woman of middle years, her auburn hair streaked with gray and pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes, sharp as flint, betrayed a mind accustomed to calculation. As a rival candlemaker from the neighboring village of Brighthaven, her fortunes had waned while Thorne's waxed, quite literally. Her navy dress, though well made, bore faint wax stains at the cuffs, a detail Poirot noted with interest. Silas Dodd, by contrast, seemed to vibrate with nervous energy. A wealthy widower with a penchant for collecting, he perched on the edge of his chair, his thin fingers twisting a silver ring on his left hand. His face, pale and angular, was dominated by eyes that darted like minnows, avoiding Poirot's gaze. His obsession with Thorne's lavender-scented candles was well known in Wickford, and his frequent visits to the workshop had raised eyebrows. Young Nathaniel Bray, the apprentice, was a study in youthful distress. Barely 20, with tousled brown hair and a face that might have been handsome were it not so pale, he sat slumped, his hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling. His gray eyes, wide and haunted, fixed on the floor, as if the patterned rug might offer escape from Poirot's piercing scrutiny. His jacket, patched at the elbows, bore the faint scent of wax, and his fingers were marked with fresh burns, testaments to his trade. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice measured yet commanding. Elias Thorne was a man of craft, a master of his art, yet someone extinguished his flame, not only his life, but the candle beside him. Why? That is the question. And you, mesdames et messieurs, you are the key to the answer. He stopped before Margaret Vane, his head tilted slightly. Madame Vane, your shop in Brighthaven suffers. Thorne's candles, his secret wax blend, his lavender scents, drew customers from miles away. Your resentment, it is palpable. Did you visit his workshop, perhaps to learn his methods? Margaret's lips tightened, her voice cool but steady. I had no need to skulk about his workshop, Mr. Poirot. My candles sell well enough. Elias Thorne was a competitor, not an enemy. Poirot's smile was thin. And yet, madame, your cuffs tell a different story. Wax stains, identical to those in Thorne's workshop. A coincidence, perhaps. Her eyes flashed, but she recovered quickly. We use the same supplier. It's common enough in our trade. Common, yet curious, Poirot murmured, moving on to Silas Dodd. Monsieur Dodd, your passion for Thorne's candles is well known. You demanded exclusive batches, offered fortunes, yet he refused you. Why such insistence? What did you seek in those candles? Dodd's fingers froze on his ring, his voice high and strained. I admired his work, that's all. His lavender candles, they're unmatched. I collect beauty. Mr. Poirot, not secrets. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Beauty, monsieur? Or something more? Your visits to the workshop were frequent. Your manner intense? Did Thorne refuse you something you could not bear to lose? Dodd flushed, his eyes dropping to his lap. I don't know what you mean. I was a customer, nothing more. Poirot turned to Nathaniel Bray, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. And you, jeune homme, the apprentice. Thorne treated you as a son, promised you his workshop. Yet something troubled you, no? A fear, perhaps, that his promise might not hold? Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper. He was good to me. I worked hard, learned everything he taught. I don't know why he'd change his mind. Change his mind? Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. You speak of his will, perhaps, a fear that the workshop might go to another? Nathaniel's head snapped up, his cheeks flushing. I didn't say that. But you thought it, Poirot said softly. The heart, it betrays the mind. Hastings, watching from the sidelines, leaned forward, his pipe forgotten. The tension in the room was palpable, each suspect a tightly wound spring. Inspector Graves shifted impatiently. This is all very dramatic, Poirot, but where's your evidence? A wet candle and some wax stains don't make a murder. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Evidence, Inspector, is not only in what we see, but in what we understand. The little gray cells, they piece together the puzzle. Let us examine the motives. He resumed pacing, his voice taking on a rhythmic cadence. Madame Vane, your business faltered as Thorns thrived. A rival's envy can burn as fiercely as any flame. Did you seek to steal his secrets, or perhaps to end his success altogether? Margaret's jaw tightened. I've built my trade on my own merit. I didn't need to kill to compete. Poirot nodded, as if conceding the point, but his eyes lingered on her stained cuffs. He turned to Dodd. Monsieur Dodd, your obsession with Thorn's candles suggests more than a collector's whim. Were you seeking something hidden in those candles? Something Thorn refused to give? Dodd's hands clenched, his ring glinting in the firelight. You're fishing, Mr. Poirot. I wanted his candles, not his life. And yet, Poirot said, your agitation speaks of a man with secrets. He pivoted to Nathaniel. Monsieur Bray, you stood to inherit a legacy, yet you feared its loss. A will changed, a promise broken. Such fears can drive a young man to desperate acts. Nathaniel's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing, his silence louder than words. Poirot stepped back, surveying the trio. Each of you had reason to wish Thorn harm, but only one of you acted. The locked room, the doused candle. These are not accidents, but signatures. The murderer left a mark, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall read it. He turned to Graves. Inspector, I require access to Thorn's home and workshop. There are clues yet to be found, clues that will speak when questioned. Graves sighed, clearly skeptical. You've got till tomorrow, Poirot. After that, I'm closing the case. Hastings, unable to contain himself, whispered, What do you make of them, Poirot? They're all hiding something, aren't they? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, mon ami, but it is not enough to hide. The truth, it has a way of burning through. As the suspects filed out, Poirot lingered, his gaze settling on a small portrait above the fireplace. Elias Thorn, stern-faced, holding a candle. You, monsieur, Poirot murmured. You saw your killer. And you left me a message in that silent flame. The parlor emptied, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of motive and opportunity. Margaret Vane's resentment, Silas Dodd's obsession, Nathaniel Bray's fear, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. But the key, Poirot knew, lay not in their words, but in the silence of a doused candle, a locked door, and a life extinguished before its time. He turned to Hastings. Come, mon ami. We shall visit Thorn's home. The workshop has spoken, but the man's life, it has more to say. They stepped into the fading light, the mist curling around them like a shroud. Wickford, with its quiet lanes and watchful eyes, held its secrets close. But Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells and unyielding curiosity, would uncover them, one flicker at a time. Chapter 3. The Craft of Candles. The morning mist had lifted, leaving Wickford bathed in a pale, watery sunlight that did little to warm the cobblestone streets. Hercule Poirot, clad in a meticulously tailored overcoat, walked with purposeful strides toward Elias Thorn's workshop, his cane tapping a rhythmic counterpoint to the village's quiet hum. Captain Hastings, at his side, adjusted his scarf against the lingering chill, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "You're certain there's more to find in that workshop, Poirot?" he asked. The police went over it thoroughly. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. The police, mon ami, see with their eyes, not with their minds. The workshop of a craftsman like Thorn, It is a canvas, painted with clues. We must read its strokes." The workshop stood as they had left it, its iron-bound door now unbolted, but guarded by a young constable who nodded stiffly at Poirot's approach. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of beeswax and tallow, a rich, earthy perfume that clung to every surface. The space was a labyrinth of creation. Shelves groaned under the weight of candles in every stage of completion, slender tapers, stout pillars, delicate votives, some infused with herbs, others plain but flawless. Workbenches were strewn with tools, molds of tin and pewter, spools of cotton wick, vats of cooling wax. A faint metallic tang lingered, barely discernible beneath the dominant aroma. Poirot's eyes swept the room, sharp and methodical. "Observe, Hastings," he said, gesturing to the orderly chaos. "This is no mere workplace. It is the mind of Elias Thorne, laid bare. Every tool, every candle, placed with precision. A man of such order does not die by chance." Hastings, peering at a row of half-molded candles, frowned. "But what are we looking for? The police found no weapon, no signs of a struggle." Poirot's gloved hand hovered over a workbench, his fingers brushing a small knife used for trimming wicks. "The weapon, mon ami, is not always a blade or a bludgeon. Sometimes it is subtle, hidden in plain sight." He moved to the central workbench where Thorne had been found, its surface still bearing the imprint of the candlemaker's final moments. The doused candle, its wick blackened and damp, stood like a silent witness. Poirot leaned close, inhaling deeply. "The lavender, Hastings. It is stronger here, yet the candle itself is unscented. Why?" He lifted the candle, turning it in the light. The wax was smooth, unmarred by cracks or spills. "No struggle," he murmured. "No wax splattered. Thorne was at peace when he died, or so it was meant to appear." His gaze fell on a small ledger tucked beneath a stack of molds. He extracted it, flipping through pages filled with Thorne's meticulous script. Orders, recipes, notes on wax blends. One entry caught his eye, dated a week prior. "Dodd demands more lavender candles. Refused. His insistence grows tiresome." "Dodd again," Hastings said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "He was obsessed, wasn't he? Could he have been desperate enough to—" "Desperate, perhaps," Poirot said, closing the ledger. "But desperation is not proof. Dodd coveted Thorne's candles, but did he kill for them?" He pocketed the ledger, his movements deliberate. "There is more here, Hastings, something overlooked." He crossed to a corner where a small wooden cabinet stood, its lock gleaming faintly. Inside were vials of oils, rosemary, cedar, and, prominently, lavender. Poirot selected the lavender vial, its cap slightly askew, and held it to the light. A faint, crystalline residue clung to the rim, invisible unless one looked closely. "This," he said softly, "is not mere oil. It is a clue." Hastings leaned in, squinting. "What is it, Poirot? Poison?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mon ami. The little gray cells, they must confirm. But this vial, it was used recently, and not for scent alone." He replaced it carefully, his eyes scanning the cabinet. A small crucible, used for melting wax, bore faint scorch marks, and beside it lay a bundle of wicks, some frayed as if hastily cut. "Disorder in a place of order," Poirot murmured. Thorne was meticulous, yet here something was rushed. He moved to a shelf lined with finished candles, each labeled with a customer's name. Several bore Dodd's initials, their lavender hue distinct. These, Poirot said, were Thorne's masterpieces, yet he withheld them from Dodd. Why? Hastings scratched his chin. Perhaps he suspected Dodd of something, trying to copy his recipe, maybe? Or perhaps, Poirot said, Thorne knew something about Dodd that made refusal necessary. He turned, his gaze settling on a small stool near the workbench, its surface scuffed as if recently moved. Kneeling, he examined the floor beneath, his fingers brushing a faint white powder. He pinched it, sniffing delicately. Chalk, perhaps, he said, or something else. We shall see. Rising, Poirot surveyed the workshop once more, his mind a whirl of connections. This place, Hastings, it speaks of Thorne's life and his death. The lavender oil, the doused candle, the ledger, they are pieces of a puzzle. But we must also know the man himself, his home, his habits, they will reveal more. They stepped outside, the constable resuming his post. The village was stirring now, shopkeepers opening shutters, a milk cart rattling by. Poirot paused, his eyes distant. Thorne was a craftsman, Hastings, but also a man of secrets. The candle was doused to hide something, perhaps a scent, perhaps a truth. We must uncover both. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed confusion. Where to next, then? Thorne's house? Oui, Poirot said, adjusting his hat. But first, a small detour. I wish to see the supplier who provided Madame Vane and Thorne their wax. The stains on her cuffs, they are too precise to be coincidence. As they walked toward the village square, Poirot's mind churned. The workshop had yielded its first secrets, the lavender oil with its strange residue, the ledger's hint of Dodd's persistence, the faint powder beneath the stool. Each was a thread, delicate but strong, in the tapestry of Elias Thorne's murder. The craft of candles, Poirot knew, was not only in wax and wick, but in the motives of those who surrounded the flame. And somewhere, in the flicker of those motives, lay the truth. Chapter 4. The Rival's Tale. The road to Brighthaven wound through fields dusted with the first frost of autumn, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and fading leaves. Hercule Poirot, seated beside Captain Hastings in a hired trap, gazed out at the rolling countryside, his gloved hands folded neatly over the head of his cane. The clip-clop of the horses' hooves provided a steady rhythm to his thoughts, which churned like the wheels beneath them. Hastings, ever the enthusiast for a country jaunt, adjusted his cap and glanced at his companion. Margaret Vane's shop, Poirot. Do you really think she's mixed up in this? She seemed more bitter than murderous. Poirot's eyes gleamed, though his expression remained impassive. Bitterness, mon ami, is a slow poison. It corrodes the heart, and sometimes it spills over into action. Madame Vane's cuffs, stained with the same wax as Thorne's workshop. Such a detail is not mere chance. We shall see what her shop reveals. Brighthaven was smaller than Wickford, its streets narrower, its shops humbler. Margaret Vane's candle-making establishment stood at the edge of the village square, a squat building with a faded sign reading, Vane's Lights. Its windows were dim, the display sparse compared to Thorne's abundant shelves. A bell jingled as Poirot and Hastings entered, the air inside heavy with the scent of tallow and a faint, sour undertone. Margaret stood behind a counter, sorting wicks, her movements brisk but precise. Her auburn hair, still tightly bound, glinted in the light of a single oil lamp, and her eyes narrowed at the sight of her visitors. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice clipped, "and Captain Hastings, I didn't expect you so soon, or at all." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but probing. "Madame Vane, the death of a rival is no small matter. I seek only to understand the truth, and your shop, it may hold answers." Margaret's lips thinned. You'll find no answers here. I told you, I had no quarrel with Elias Thorne beyond business. His death doesn't profit me. Does it not? Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp as they scanned the shop. The shelves held candles of decent make, functional tapers and squat pillars, but none matched the elegance of Thorne's work. A workbench in the corner bore tools similar to those in Wickford, molds, a crucible, a spool of wick. Yet the air lacked the rich complexity of Thorne's workshop, and the candles, though serviceable, seemed dull, as if crafted without passion. Poirot approached the workbench, his fingers brushing a mold crusted with wax. You use the same supplier as Monsieur Thorne, oui? The wax on your cuffs, it matches his. A curious coincidence, non? Margaret's hands stilled, her jaw tightening. As I said, it's common in our trade. The supplier in Wickford serves half the county. You're chasing shadows, Mr. Poirot. Shadows, perhaps, Poirot said, but shadows cast by light reveal much. He lifted a small vial from the workbench, its label reading, lavender oil. He uncapped it, inhaling deeply. This scent, it is familiar, yet not quite the same as Thorne's. He tilted the vial, noting its clean rim. No residue, unlike the one in Thorne's workshop. You use lavender, yet your candles lack its fragrance. Why? Margaret crossed her arms. Not every candle needs scent. My customers want light, not perfume. Thorne's obsession with lavender was his own folly. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Folly, madame, or genius? His lavender candles drew customers from Brighthaven to Wickford. Your shop, it suffers by comparison. Her eyes flashed, but she held her composure. I've made my way for 20 years. I don't need Thorne's tricks to sell candles. Hastings, lingering near a shelf, picked up a taper and examined it. These are sturdy enough, Poirot, but they're nothing like Thorne's. His had a certain glow. Précisément, Poirot said, his gaze never leaving Margaret. And that glow, Madame Vane, did it not tempt you to learn his methods? To visit his workshop, perhaps, under cover of night? Margaret's face hardened. I told you, I never set foot in his workshop. I had no need to steal his secrets. My candles sell to those who value honest work. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor. Honest work, oui, but limited success. Thorne's secret wax blend, his lavender infusion, these were not merely candles, but art. Did you not wish to know how he achieved such perfection? Margaret's voice rose, sharp as a blade. You accuse me of theft, Mr. Poirot? Or worse. I competed with Thorne, yes, but I didn't kill him. His death changes nothing for me. Poirot stopped, his eyes locking onto hers. And yet, madame, your cuffs suggest otherwise. The wax stains. They are not from your shop. The texture, the hue, they match Thorne's blend. You were in his workshop, non? For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of the oil lamp. Margaret's hands clenched, then relaxed. Very well, she said, her voice low. I visited his shop once, months ago. I wanted to see his methods, yes, but I didn't steal anything, and I certainly didn't kill him. Poirot's smile was faint. Merci, madame, for the truth, at least in part. But why visit in secret? Why not ask Thorne directly? Margaret looked away, her expression unreadable. He wouldn't have shared. He guarded his recipes like a miser with gold. I thought, if I saw his setup, I could improve my own. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was far from settled. And this visit, it was before his death, yet the stains on your cuffs are fresh. How do you explain this? Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she masked it. I must have brushed against his wax at the supplier's. It happens. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. We shall see. He turned to Hastings. Come, mon ami, Madame Vane has given us much to consider. As they stepped into the square, Hastings glanced back at the shop. She's hiding something, Poirot. That story about the supplier doesn't hold water. Non, Poirot agreed, his eyes distant. Madame Vane is a woman of pride, but also of desperation. She visited Thorne's workshop. Oui, but for what purpose? To learn, to steal, or to plan? The little gray cells, they are not yet convinced. They climbed back into the trap, the horse snorting softly as it started toward Wickford. The sky was darkening, clouds gathering like conspirators. Poirot's mind turned over the encounter. Margaret's guarded words, the wax stains, the absence of lavender in her candles. She had admitted to visiting Thorne's workshop, but her story was too neat, too practiced. The truth, Poirot knew, lay buried beneath layers of half-truths, like wax poured over a hidden wick. Hastings, he said suddenly, we must learn more of this supplier. If Madame Vane and Thorne shared materials, perhaps there is a connection, a link between their crafts and Thorne's death. Hastings nodded, his enthusiasm rekindled. Right then, to the supplier next? Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft but resolute. And then to the heart of Elias Thorne's life. His home, his secrets, they await us. The rival has spoken, but the candle, it still holds its silence. Chapter 5. The Obsessed Customer. The dusk settled over Wickford like a velvet curtain, softening the edges of the village's stone cottages and casting long shadows across the lanes. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, their breath visible in the cooling air, approached the imposing gates of Silas Dodd's manor, a Georgian edifice perched on a low hill overlooking the village. Its windows glowed with an eerie warmth, as if the house itself were alive with flickering light. Hastings, tugging at his coat collar, glanced at Poirot. This place gives me the creeps, Poirot. All those candles Dodd's got burning must be hundreds. Bit excessive, don't you think? Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, glinted in the twilight. Excess, mon ami, is often a mask for something deeper. Monsieur Dodd's obsession with Thorne's candles, it is not merely a collector's whim. We shall see what burns beneath his passion. A butler, gaunt and silent, admitted them into a hall where the air was thick with the scent of lavender and wax. Candles lined every surface, on mantels, side tables, even clustered in ornate candelabras, casting a trembling glow that danced across polished wood and heavy drapes. Silas Dodd awaited them in a drawing room, standing before a fireplace where yet more candles burned, their flames reflected in his restless eyes. He was a wiry man, his dark suit impeccable, but his demeanor unsteady, his fingers twisting that same silver ring Poirot had noted before. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Dodd said, his voice tight with forced civility. I trust this visit is necessary. I've already told you all I know about poor Thorne. Poirot inclined his head, his smile courteous but probing. Necessary, oui, Monsieur Dodd. The death of Elias Thorne is no simple matter. Your admiration for his candles intrigues me. May we sit? Dodd gestured to a pair of armchairs, his movements jerky. Poirot settled with deliberate care, his cane resting across his knees, while Hastings perched on the edge of his seat, eyes darting to the flickering lights. Monsieur Dodd, Poirot began, you were a frequent visitor to Thorne's workshop. You sought his lavender candles, exclusively, non? Why such devotion to one man's craft? Dodd's fingers stilled on his ring, his gaze flickering to the fire. Thorne's candles were exceptional. The lavender. It's not just scent, Mr. Poirot. It's memory, comfort. My late wife loved them. I collect them in her honor. Poirot's eyebrow arched, his tone gentle but incisive. A touching sentiment, monsieur. Yet your demands were not merely those of a grieving widower. You offered Thorne fortunes for exclusive batches, and he refused. Why press so hard? Dodd's face tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. I admired his skill. Is it a crime to want the best? Thorne was stubborn, refused to sell more than a few at a time, said he couldn't keep up with my orders. Could not or would not? Poirot's voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a blade. His ledger notes your insistence, monsieur. It troubled him. What was it you sought in those candles, beyond their scent? Dodd's eyes darted to a corner of the room, where a tall cabinet stood, its glass doors locked, revealing rows of lavender-hued candles within. Nothing, he said quickly. I wanted his work, that's all. Beauty, permanence. You wouldn't understand. Poirot's gaze followed Dodd's to the cabinet. Beauty. Oui, but permanence? Candles burn, monsieur. They vanish, yet you hoard them, lock them away. What do you fear losing? Dodd stood abruptly, his voice rising. You're twisting my words, Poirot. I'm a collector, not a criminal. I didn't kill Thorne. Hastings, startled by the outburst, glanced at Poirot, who remained unruffled. Calm yourself, Monsieur Dodd, Poirot said. I accuse no one. Yet. But this cabinet, it interests me. May I see its contents? Dodd hesitated, his hand hovering, near his pocket as if to clutch a key. It's private, he said, his voice low. Just my collection, nothing to do with Thorne's death. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Private, perhaps, but relevant. A man who locks away candles as if they were jewels. He has secrets. We shall respect your privacy for now. He rose, smoothing his coat. But tell me, monsieur, when did you last see Thorne alive? Dodd sank back into his chair, his energy spent. 2 days before he died. I went to his workshop, asked for more candles. He refused, said he was tired of my demands. We argued, but I left. That's all. An argument, Poirot mused. Heated, perhaps? Enough to leave a mark? Dodd's eyes narrowed. If you're implying I hurt him, you're wrong. I left him alive, working at his bench. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was already turning. He crossed to the cabinet, peering through the glass. The candles inside were identical to those in Thorne's workshop, lavender-tinted, their wicks pristine. These, he said, are Thorne's work, non? Yet they are unburned. Why collect what you do not use? Dodd's jaw clenched. They're keepsakes. I told you, they remind me of her. Her, Poirot repeated softly. Your wife. And yet, Monsieur Dodd, your eyes betray you. There is fear in them, not only grief. Hastings, unable to resist, interjected. Poirot, do you think he's hiding something in those candles? A formula, maybe, or something else? Poirot's gaze remained on Dodd. A possibility, mon ami, but we shall not pry. Yet. He turned back to Dodd. One final question, monsieur. Did you ever see Thorne use lavender oil in his workshop? A vial, perhaps, with a loose cap? Dodd frowned, caught off guard. Oil? I don't recall. He used many oils, I suppose. Why? Poirot's smile was faint. No reason, monsieur. Merely a detail. He gestured to Hastings. Come, mon ami. We have seen enough for now." As they stepped into the night, the manor's glow fading behind them, Hastings shook his head. "He's a queer one, Poirot. All that fuss over candles. It's not normal. Do you think he's our man?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Dodd is a man consumed, Hastings, but by what? Grief, obsession, or guilt? His cabinet holds more than candles, I think, but murder? No, I am not convinced. His fear is real, but it is not the fear of a killer caught. It is something else." They walked in silence, the village lights twinkling below. Poirot's mind churned. Dodd's agitation, the locked cabinet, the unburned candles. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. The lavender oil, the doused candle, the locked room. They pointed to a truth hidden in plain sight, a truth tied to Thorne's craft and those who coveted it. Dodd was a thread, but not the knot. "Tomorrow," Poirot said, "we visit young Nathaniel, Bray. The apprentice, he knows more than he says. And then, mon ami, we return to the workshop. The silent flame. It still has much to tell." Chapter 6. The Apprentice's Secret. The morning sun struggled through a veil of clouds, casting a pallid light over Wickford's narrow streets. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the damp chill, led the way to a modest lane where Elias Thorne's apprentice, Nathaniel Bray, resided. Captain Hastings, trailing a step behind, rubbed his hands together for warmth, his breath forming faint clouds in the air. "This lad, Nathaniel," Hastings said, his voice tinged with curiosity. "He seemed shaken at the parlor meeting. Do you think he's got something to hide, Poirot?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. "The young Monsieur Bray, mon ami, is a bundle of nerves, fear, guilt, or grief. It is written in his trembling hands and averted gaze. The apprentice, he is close to the heart of this mystery, for he was closest to Thorne. We shall see what his attic reveals." Nathaniel's lodging was a cramped attic above the candlemaker's workshop, reached by a rickety staircase that creaked underfoot. The door, weathered and slightly ajar, opened into a small room smelling of wax and stale bread. A narrow bed, a battered table, and a single chair crowded the space, lit by a dormer window that let in a sliver of gray light. Nathaniel stood by the table, his boyish face pale, his hands fidgeting with a frayed cuff. Wax burns, fresh and red, marked his fingers, and his gray eyes darted nervously as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Monsieur Bray," Poirot began, his voice smooth but firm, "we meet again. The death of your master, Elias Thorne, weighs heavily on you, non? You were his apprentice, his chosen heir, yet something troubles you." Nathaniel's shoulders hunched, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was good to me, Mr. Poirot. Taught me everything, how to blend wax, trim wicks, pour molds. I don't know why he's gone." Poirot's gaze softened, but his scrutiny remained keen. "A father figure, oui? Yet in the parlor you spoke of his distance, a change in his demeanor. He mentioned altering his will, perhaps." Nathaniel's eyes widened, a flush creeping up his neck. "I didn't say that. I mean, he was moody lately, that's all. Said I wasn't ready to take over, not yet. But I worked hard, I swear." Poirot paced the small room, his cane tapping lightly on the floorboards. "Hard work. It is admirable, jeune homme. But fear. It can undo such efforts. You feared losing the workshop, no? A legacy promised, then threatened." Nathaniel sank onto the chair, his hands twisting together. He didn't say it outright, but he hinted at a cousin, someone in London, said the shop might go to them if I didn't prove myself. I was scared, yes, but I didn't do anything. Poirot's eyes roamed the attic, noting its sparseness. A small trunk sat beneath the bed, its lid slightly askew. He knelt, his movements precise, and slid it out. "With your permission, Monsieur Bray?" he asked, though his tone suggested the question was a formality. Nathaniel nodded, his face ashen. Inside the trunk were spare clothes, a few tools, and a worn notebook filled with Thorne's recipes, copied in Nathaniel's uneven hand. Tucked in a corner, wrapped in a rag, was a small glass bottle labeled arsenic. Poirot held it up, the faint powder inside catching the light. "This, monsieur, is yours?" Nathaniel's breath hitched, his voice trembling. "It's for pests, rats in the workshop. They chew the wicks, ruin the wax. Master Thorne kept it for that, and I used it sometimes." Poirot's eyebrow arched, his fingers turning the bottle carefully. "Rats, you say?" A convenient explanation, yet arsenic, it is a poison not only for vermin. "Tell me, did you handle this bottle the day Thorne died?" "No." Nathaniel's voice cracked. "I haven't touched it in weeks. I swear, Mr. Poirot, I didn't hurt him." Hastings, standing by the window, frowned. "Poirot, that's a serious find. Arsenic in his room. It doesn't look good for the lad." Poirot pocketed the bottle, his expression unreadable. "Looks, mon ami, can deceive. But this bottle, it speaks. We shall test its voice." He turned back to Nathaniel, his tone gentle but probing. "You were in the workshop that night, oui, before Thorne was found?" Nathaniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I left early. He told me to go, said he wanted to work alone. I went to the pub, had a pint. Ask anyone there, they'll tell you." Poirot's gaze lingered on the boy's hands, the fresh burns standing out against his pale skin. "These burns, Monsieur Bray, they are new. From the workshop, perhaps, or from something else?" Nathaniel flexed his fingers, wincing. "From pouring wax yesterday. It happens all the time. You can't avoid it in our trade." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice soft. He moved to the table, where a single candle stood, its wick trimmed but unlit. He lifted it, sniffing delicately. "No lavender," he murmured. Yet the air in the workshop, it carried that scent. "Tell me, did Thorne use lavender oil that night?" Nathaniel shook his head. "Not that I saw. He was working on plain tapers, nothing fancy. He didn't like scented candles late at night, said the fumes gave him headaches." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Headaches, you say? Most interesting." He set the candle down, his mind racing. The arsenic, the burns, Nathaniel's fear. They were threads in a tapestry, but the pattern remained elusive. "One final question, jeune homme. Did you ever see a vial of lavender oil in the workshop, its cap loose, perhaps with a strange residue?" Nathaniel frowned, his brow furrowing. Maybe. There was a vial on the workbench sometimes, but I didn't touch it. Master Thorne handled all the oils himself." Poirot nodded, his smile faint but satisfied. "Merci, Monsieur Bray. You have been most helpful, perhaps more than you know." He gestured to Hastings. "Come, mon ami. The apprentice has spoken, but the workshop, it calls us back." As they descended the creaking stairs, Hastings shook his head. "That arsenic, Poirot, it's damning. The boy's scared out of his wits, and those burns. Could he have been tampering with something?" Poirot's cane tapped rhythmically as they stepped into the lane. "The arsenic, oui, it is a shadow over young Bray. But shadows, Hastings, they distort. The burns are from his trade, perhaps, but the fear, it is not only of being caught, it is of loss, of betrayal. Nathaniel loved Thorn, yet feared his rejection. Is that enough for murder? The little gray cells, they are not yet certain. The village was quiet, the morning's bustle giving way to a lull as shopkeepers swept their stoops. Poirot's mind turned over the encounter, Nathaniel's trembling hands, the arsenic bottle, the absence of lavender in his candle. The boy's story held truth, but also gaps, spaces where secrets might hide. The workshop, with its doused candle and lingering lavender, held the key, Poirot was sure. But first he needed to confirm the arsenic's role, and the supplier shared by Thorn and Margaret Vane might hold answers. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice resolute. "We must visit the supplier this afternoon. The wax, the oils, they connect our suspects. And then we return to Thorn's home. The man's life, it will illuminate his death." They walked on, the clouds parting to reveal a weak sun. The silent flame, Poirot knew, was no mere metaphor. It was a message left by a killer who thought themselves clever. But Hercule Poirot, with his relentless logic and unerring instinct, would unravel it, one delicate thread at a time. Chapter 7. The Doused Candle. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the grimy windows of Elias Thorne's workshop, casting a muted glow over the cluttered benches and shelves. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his immaculate figure a stark contrast to the chaotic array of wax molds, wicks, and tools surrounding him. Captain Hastings, leaning against a workbench, watched with barely concealed impatience as Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edge of the table where Thorn had been found. The air was heavy with the familiar scent of beeswax, undercut by that faint, elusive tang that Poirot had noted before. A trace of lavender, yes, but something sharper, more sinister. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We've been over this place twice already. The police found nothing but the body and that blasted doused candle. What are you hoping to uncover now?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Patience, mon ami. The workshop, it is like a book, and we have read only the first pages. The candle, the silent flame, it is the chapter that holds the secret. Why was it doused? Why water, and not a breath to extinguish it? That, Hastings, is the question that will lead us to the truth." He moved to the workbench where Thorn's body had lain, his gaze fixed on the single candle that had been found beside him. Its wick, blackened and sodden, stood as a mute testament to the moment of death. Poirot lifted it carefully, turning it in the light. "No wax spilled," he murmured. "No signs of struggle. Thorn was at his work, calm, precise, yet someone ensured this candle would not burn." Hastings frowned, scratching his chin. Could it have been an accident? A spill from a nearby cup, perhaps? Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. "Non, Hastings. Look." He gestured to the workbench, its surface clean save for a faint ring of water beneath the candle's base. No cup, no jug, no spilled liquid elsewhere. The water was applied deliberately, to this candle alone. He set the candle down and produced a small glass vial from his pocket. The lavender oil from Thorn's cabinet, its cap loose, its rim bearing that curious crystalline residue. "And this, mon ami, is the key." Hastings leaned closer, peering at the vial. "That residue again. You think it's poison, don't you?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The little gray cells, they suspect. But suspicion is not proof. Let us test the method." He crossed to a nearby shelf, selecting an unlit taper identical to the one beside Thorn's body. With deliberate care, he lit it, the flame catching with a soft hiss. He then poured a small amount of water from a flask he carried, dousing the wick. A faint, acrid scent rose, mingling with the workshop's wax-heavy air. "You smell it, Hastings?" "The same odor we noted when we first entered. Not lavender alone, but something else, something chemical." Hastings sniffed, his nose wrinkling. "Good Lord, Poirot, you're right. It's sharp, almost like—" "What, ammonia?" "Non," Poirot said, his voice low. "It is the scent of poison, masked by lavender. The doused candle was not merely a symbol. It was a necessity. The killer used water to dissipate the fumes, to conceal their crime." He returned to the workbench, his eyes scanning every inch. A small crucible, used for melting wax, caught his attention. Its interior was scorched, but a faint white powder clung to its rim. Poirot scraped a sample with a penknife, sealing it in a handkerchief. "This," he said, "may confirm what the vial suggests. Arsenic, perhaps, or another toxin. We shall have it tested." Hastings's eyes widened. "Arsenic? Like the bottle in Nathaniel's attic?" "Précisément," Poirot said, "but we must not leap to conclusions. The apprentice had access, but so did others. The lavender oil. It was handled by someone with knowledge of Thorne's habits, someone who knew he worked alone at night, who knew the scent of lavender would not arouse suspicion." He paced the workshop, his cane tapping rhythmically. "Consider, Hastings. The door was bolted, the windows barred. The killer entered before Thorne locked himself in, or—" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Or they were already inside, trusted by Thorne. The candle was doused to hide the poison's fumes, but also to create the illusion of an accident, a spilled cup, a moment of clumsiness. Yet there was no cup." Hastings rubbed his temples. "So the killer poisoned Thorne, doused the candle to cover the smell, and then— What, slipped out before the door was bolted?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind piecing together the fragments. "Or they ensured the door appeared bolted from within. A trick, perhaps, with string or wire. A method to deceive. We must examine the lock more closely." He approached the heavy workshop door, its iron bolt still bent from the police's forced entry. Kneeling, he inspected the mechanism, his fingers tracing the grooves. A faint scratch, barely visible, marked the bolt's edge. "Interesting," he murmured. "A tool was used here, something fine, like a wire. The lock was manipulated, Hastings, not from without, but from within, to make it seem secure." Hastings blinked, struggling to keep up. "You mean the killer was inside with Thorne, poisoned him, doused the candle, and then rigged the lock to look bolted?" "Oui," Poirot said, rising. "Or they prepared the poison earlier, leaving Thorne to succumb alone. The lavender oil, the doused candle. These are the killer's signature, meant to mislead. But they have underestimated Hercule Poirot." He turned back to the workbench, his eyes lingering on the vial of lavender oil. "This residue, it is not oil but a crystalline substance, likely dissolved into the oil to be inhaled or ingested. Thorne, working late, breathed it in, or perhaps drank it in a moment of distraction. The killer knew his habits, knew he would be alone." Hastings shook his head, his voice tinged with awe. "It's diabolical, Poirot. But who? Nathaniel with his arsenic? Margaret with her wax-stained cuffs? Or Dodd with his obsession?" Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. "All have motives, mon ami, but only one had the opportunity and the cunning. The powder, the vial, the lock. They point to a mind both desperate and precise. We must confirm the poison's nature, and we must speak again to our suspects. The supplier, too, may hold a piece of this puzzle. As they stepped into the fading light, the workshop seemed to close in behind them, its secrets guarded but not impenetrable. Poirot's mind was alight with connections, the acrid scent, the manipulated lock, the crystalline residue. The doused candle was no mere detail. It was the killer's attempt to extinguish not just a flame, but the truth. Yet Poirot, with his relentless logic, was closing in, each clue a spark illuminating the darkness of Elias Thorne's murder. "Come, Hastings," he said, his voice steady. "To the supplier, and then to Thorne's home. The silent flame speaks, and we shall listen." Chapter 8. The motive unveiled. The parlor of Elias Thorne's home glowed softly in the lamplight, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the truth about to be revealed. Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, his small, meticulous figure commanding the room with an air of quiet authority. His polished shoes gleamed, his mustache was impeccable, and his green eyes sparkled with the clarity of a mind that had unraveled the knot of a complex puzzle. Captain Hastings sat near the window, his face a mixture of anticipation and bewilderment, while Inspector Graves leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, his skepticism barely concealed. The three suspects, Margaret Vane, Silas Dodd, and Nathaniel Bray, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with varying degrees of unease. Margaret Vane's posture was rigid, her sharp eyes fixed on Poirot, though her fingers betrayed a slight tremor as they clutched the armrest of her chair. Silas Dodd, his nervous energy barely contained, twisted his silver ring, his gaze flickering between Poirot and the locked cabinet in his own manner, miles away. Nathaniel Bray, pale and trembling, seemed to shrink into his seat, his hands marked with wax burns, his gray eyes wide with dread. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice calm but resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs, we gather to illuminate the death of Elias Thorne, a man whose craft was his life, and whose life was extinguished in a locked workshop beside a doused candle. This was no accident, no failure of the heart. It was murder, calculated and cruel, and the truth, it has been hidden in the shadows of a silent flame. But I, Hercule Poirot, have seen through the darkness." Inspector Graves snorted softly. "Get on with it, Poirot. You've had your time. What's this truth you've found?" Poirot's smile was thin, his gaze unwavering. "Patience, Inspector. The little gray cells, they have worked tirelessly, and now they shall speak." He turned to the suspects, his eyes sweeping over them. "Each of you had reason to wish Thorne harm. Each of you had a thread in this tapestry of deceit. Let us unravel it." He faced Margaret Vane first, his tone measured. "Madame Vane, your rivalry with Thorne was bitter. His superior candles drew customers from your shop in Brighthaven, leaving your business to falter. You admitted to visiting his workshop, seeking his secrets. The wax stains on your cuffs, identical to Thorne's blend, confirm this. You coveted his skill. But murder? None. Your pride. It is fierce, but it is not the pride of a killer. You sought to steal his craft, not his life." Margaret's lips parted, a protest forming, but she held her silence, her eyes narrowing. Poirot continued, undeterred, turning to Silas Dodd. "Monsieur Dodd, your obsession with Thorne's lavender candles was more than a collector's whim. You demanded exclusive batches, offered fortunes, yet Thorne refused. Your locked cabinet, filled with unburned candles, suggests a deeper need, perhaps a connection to your late wife, perhaps something else. But your fear, it is of loss, not of guilt. You valued Thorn's work too much to end it. You did not kill him. Dodd's shoulders sagged, his fingers stilling on his ring, though his eyes remained guarded. Poirot's gaze settled on Nathaniel Bray, who flinched as if struck. And you, jeune homme, the apprentice, Thorn was your mentor, your father in all but name. He promised you his workshop, his legacy. Yet he grew distant, spoke of a cousin, of changing his will. This fear, it consumed you, non? You, who knew his habits, his workshop, his oils. You, who had access to the arsenic found in your attic. Nathaniel's voice broke, a sob escaping. I didn't. I swear, Mr. Poirot, I loved him. Poirot raised a hand, his voice gentle but relentless. Love, it can twist into desperation. Let us reconstruct the crime. Thorn was poisoned, his death masked by the scent of lavender oil, its vial tainted with a crystalline residue. Arsenic, dissolved to release deadly fumes. The candle beside him was doused with water, not to extinguish a flame, but to dissipate the poison's acrid scent, to make his death appear natural. The door, bolted from within, was a trick, a wire, perhaps, used to pull the bolt after the killer departed. He paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor. The lavender oil, it was the vehicle. Thorn, working late, inhaled the fumes as he labored, unaware of the poison seeping into his lungs. The killer knew his routine, knew he would be alone, knew the lavender would mask the truth. Only one among you had such intimacy with Thorn's life. Nathaniel's face crumpled, tears streaming. No, please. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. Monsieur Bray, you feared disinheritance. Thorn doubted your skill, spoke of a cousin in London. You saw your future slipping away, the arsenic in your attic, the fresh burns on your hands from handling hot wax that night. You prepared the poisoned oil, left it in the workshop, and ensured Thorn would breathe it in. You doused the candle to hide the fumes, rigged the bolt to lock behind you, and slipped away to the pub, establishing your alibi. Nathaniel collapsed forward, his sobs echoing in the quiet room. He was going to take it all, the shop, my future. He said I wasn't ready, that his cousin deserved it more. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop, to think. Graves stepped forward, his face grim. That's enough, lad. You're coming with me. He signaled to a constable, who gently but firmly took Nathaniel's arm. Hastings, his jaw slack, turned to Poirot. Good heavens, Poirot. How did you piece it together? The arsenic, the lock. It's devilishly clever. Poirot's smile was somber. The candle, Hastings. It was the silent witness. Its doused wick spoke of a killer who needed to hide the poison's scent. The lavender oil, the manipulated bolt, Nathaniel's fear. They all pointed to the truth. The little gray cells. They see what others overlook. As Nathaniel was led away, Margaret Vane rose, her face pale but composed. I didn't wish him dead, she said quietly, but I'm glad it's over. Dodd, still twisting his ring, muttered, Poor boy, poor Thorn. Poirot watched them go, his expression unreadable. The heart, it can betray the hand, Hastings. Nathaniel loved Thorn, but fear turned that love to poison. They stepped into the night, the village silent under a starless sky. The case was solved, the silent flame's message deciphered. Yet Poirot's mind lingered on the tragedy of a young man undone by his own desperation, a flame extinguished not by water, but by the weight of a broken trust.